Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Building Strong Foundations in Our Workforce digital event. I am Daisy Hooper. I'm Head of Policy and Public Affairs at CMI, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mims Davies MP, Minister for Employment, Dr. Fiona Aldridge, who is Director of Policy and Research at the Learning and Work Institute, and Hayden Humphreys, who is TV Recycling Team Leader at Veolia. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this event. Today's session is being recorded, and we will be sharing it later today with those of you who booked to attend the event. The recording will also be available on the CMI website and our YouTube channel. The catalyst for this event is some research that we at CMI have undertaken with the Learning and Work Institute on the role of managers in supporting workers with low levels of qualifications or training. I'm going to hand over in a moment to Fiona to present the research findings to get us started, and then we'll have some initial reflections from the Minister before going into questions. So please do type any questions that you have in the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we will answer as many as we can throughout the event. It looks like the Minister is not quite here yet. I know that she had an event that was finishing just before this one. So we'll kick off with the research, Fiona, if that's all right, and then we'll hand over to the Minister when she gets here.
That's great. Thank you, Daisy. So it's great to be with you, everybody. I'm Fiona Aldridge, Director of Policy and Research at Learning and Work Institute, and we're a research, development and policy organisation working across lifelong learning, skills and employment. And it's been a great pleasure to work with CMI on this research. I'd just like to go over to my slides, please. And the first slide, which has a, next slide, please. The first chart draws on the labour market statistics that were published yesterday. These are published monthly by the government, and has helped us really to track and understand what's been happening to the economy throughout this crisis. And the great news from yesterday's data is that it's a really positive story to tell, which shows that the labour market is recovering as the economy opens up. Employment is rising, although it's still lower than we saw a year ago. On the next slide, we can see that labour demand is also rising. So online vacancies, which fell by about 2/3 during the first lockdown, are now above pre-crisis levels as businesses are starting to open up and starting to recruit. And hours worked are also rising as people are returning back from furlough. So all really good news that people are re-entering the labour market, and also people are moving around the labour market. Next slide, please. I think what we have seen, however, from the COVID crisis over the last year or so is there has been quite a significant impact on the labour market. And although there is positive news, I think we have to be realistic that the crisis is by no means over. In particular, one of the most powerful trends that we've seen is that the crisis has very much exacerbated those previously existing labour market inequalities. So what we've seen, and as you can see on the slide, is that unemployment has tended to rise fastest in those areas which were left behind. So those areas where there were highest levels of unemployment already. And we've seen particular groups of people most affected. So those with fewer qualifications, those in lower level occupations have been more vulnerable to unemployment. And there's been a particular issue around young people. And although far more have stayed in education through the crisis, what we see is that they've been particularly affected around their employment. So 60% of the fall in employment that we have seen to date has been around young people, despite the fact that they only make up 12% of total employment. And in this context, we designed the research that we've been working on and are talking about today. We very much wanted to ensure that low-skilled adults, that young people, as they've been most affected, also get to benefit from the economic recovery. We need to ensure that that happens, and this is very much what our research is all about. So I'd like to turn to the research now. So on the next slide, what we see is that despite challenging economic times where there were fewer opportunities, what we still see is that there has also continued to be ongoing flows around the labour market, and that low-skilled workers and young people continue to have changed roles all throughout the last year or so. And we've been interested to find out about how that has happened and the challenges of that and the role that managers can play in supporting those job changes to be successful. Just as a quick oversight, in order to get these research findings, we surveyed over 1,000 managers and senior leaders. We surveyed over 1,300 employees, and we also did some deep dive case study interviews with 9 managers and 9 low skill workers in order to really find out the depth of their experience. And we draw on all of that within the report, within the case studies and the findings I'm sharing now. And then just a point of definition. I'm going to talk, and the research talks about low-skilled workers. What we mean, the common definition for that, is for those workers who have qualifications below level 2. Now, of course, qualifications is just a proxy for skills. We know that there are many people who don't have qualifications above that, but are still really have valuable skills. And of course, if this crisis has taught us anything, actually it's taught us that those really valuable essential workers can often be people who aren't qualified at a high level, and yet we've come to recognise the extremely valuable role that they play. So it's no means meant to be a derogative term, but just about levels of qualification. So on this slide, what we see is that 37% of all employees, 25% of low-skilled workers have changed jobs throughout the crisis. And for those adults who are low-skilled, and for young people in particular, changing jobs has often meant changing employers too, starting a job with a new employer. And that can be even harder because you're less familiar with the context, and therefore the support that they have is even more important. So let's go on to the next slide. We know that starting a new job can be challenging at the best of times, and it's even more so during a pandemic. And we asked our employees what the challenges were of starting their new job during the pandemic. And the things that come out on top, and you might not be surprised on these, around developing new skills for a role, learning new processes, getting to know your manager and your colleagues. In particular, low-skilled workers were more likely to report that they found it difficult during the crisis to connect with their manager and to connect with their colleagues. And what we see from the rest of the research, that changes to the way in which we work, particularly remote working, have made this particularly difficult. Next slide, please. As I said, doing so, changing jobs in a global pandemic, can be even harder than it is ordinarily. 60% of managers who've been involved in supporting new recruits who are low-skilled workers to the pandemic said that they have found it much harder to onboard them and to support them during the crisis. And again, that idea of them being remote, or their workers being remote, or new ways of working, and the kind of restrictions around social distancing have all added into that. It has been particularly challenging. The chart on the right shows some of the specific challenges that they've encountered. So around 3 in 10 cite things like lack of practical or technical skills, some issues around poor attitude and lack of motivation. Around 3 in 10 again refer to issues of lack of digital skills. But there's also some wider issues around lack of work experience and readiness, some issues around COVID precautions, and also about lack of those kind of basic skills, literacy and numeracy. Next slide, please. We've also seen from the research that managers are critical to low-skilled staff successfully starting a new job. And both managers say that and employees. So 91% of low-skilled employers say it's really important to have a supportive manager when taking up a new role. And 79% of all employees and 82% of low-skilled employees who've changed roles say that they receive the right amount of support from their manager to do that, that it's really important and they've had the right amount of support. And that's one of the really encouraging findings, that most managers and most people are getting the right amount of support to help them address some of the very significant challenges that are encountered when you start a job, and particularly when you start a job during the pandemic. We asked employees about 3 types of support or 3 particular areas that they think managers can make a difference, to see how important they think that they feel it is. And here are the figures here. So 92% of low-skilled employees say that it's really important to have a manager who gives you feedback on your performance. That 85% say that it's really important to have a manager who helps you develop workplace networks, and 93% say it's important to have a manager who supports you to develop your technical skills. It's a really, really critical role that a manager has to play. And I think we do need to go back to that previous finding, which says, but 60% of managers have found this much harder to do during the pandemic. So what support have managers given? Well, on the next slide, we asked managers what they've done. And here are some of the findings. So they've provided a range of support, from managing health and well-being to developing new skills, to connecting team members, to help understanding roles. And those with those new entrants, perhaps with their least work experience, or those who have worked remotely, have needed most support, but managers have had to help with all of this. On the next slide, we outline how this support has been provided. And as you can see, most managers have been providing that support through regular meetings, check-ins and briefings, and that has been really highly valued. They've also been discussing well-being and had a critical role to play in providing regular and honest feedback. But as you can see from this chart, managers have deployed a whole range of skills and techniques, often very contextualised to the workplace that they work in and the teams that they have and the relationships that are already in existence, to make sure that that support has been really strong and really effective. And a lot of that has been really effective. I think one of the things that managers say to us is they've spent a lot of time doing this, though. And one of the challenges is, of course, managers have had their own job to do at the same time. And managers in our survey, and that we spoke to on a more individual basis, have said actually that's created quite a lot of time pressures for them as they seek to make sure that their team members and their colleagues are well supported, but they also get their job done at the same time. So some real pressures on managers during this whole process. If we go on to the next slide, I'm happy to answer more questions about the research findings later, but just wanted to jaunt through them now. We have used the research to think about, well, what are the implications for both employers and what are the implications for government? And I think there are 3 things for government that we really wanted to highlight. I think our findings clearly show that the role of the manager is critically important in making a success of a new job move, whether that's to a new organisation or whether it's to taking a different role or a promotion. And we're really conscious at both CMI and Learning and Work Institute that the government has responded to the economic crisis by putting in place an unprecedented economic package to protect businesses and to support skills development. But actually much less attention has been put into place to think about how do we make a success of those roles when they are taken up, when people start new jobs or move roles. And I think one of the critical policy implications from this is we need to spend more time in thinking about how we invest in managers so that we get really good value for money and really good impact from those billions that we are spending in getting people into work. So our 3 recommendations are, firstly, we need to really think about the role of the manager in the vast array of employment and skills policies that are coming into place, thinking about Kickstart and Restart and apprenticeships and a whole range of programmes, and we are spending billions, and that is to be applauded. But how do we invest in managers too, so that we make the most out of those? I think the second recommendation is just reflecting on the fact that managers' skills are really important if we are going to get this right. And therefore, we need to build core skills, including management skills, into all of our skills interventions so that our managers are upskilled and can do that job as effectively as possible and support people as they transition into employment and as they transition between roles. And then I think thirdly, really mindful that remote working and different ways of working have been a major challenge for people during the crisis. As the economy opens up again and as people return to workplaces, lots of employers are having conversations about hybrid working. And I think we have yet to fully understand what the implications might be for people as they return to hybrid working, and particularly for young people entering the labour market and for low-skilled workers. And I think we need to do much more work to develop our understanding of what the implications are for employers as we do this, and particularly for managers and how we use their skills. So some recommendations for government. On the next slide, we want to recognise that actually there's lots of the findings from this research which have implications for employers themselves and for managers themselves. And as part of this research report that we've published, that CMI have published, there's some really great case studies of how managers have tackled the issue and what they see the ongoing challenges to be. But we've also developed a set of case studies with some very practical tools that will help managers and employers think about what they need to do. And the two things that we think they need to do is for employers and managers to really prioritise the development of professional practice, so that we ensure that we have the most skilled managers that we can in order to help us through this transition. But also to ensure that all staff, including new low-skilled recruits and young people, can access high-quality ongoing professional development that supports them to develop the skills they need to be successful in the workplace. And I would really recommend that, as well as reading the report, you have a look at some of those great practical resources to make sure that that great figure of people who say their managers are doing a great job, that we can improve that even further and make sure we have a successful experience for those low-skilled workers and young people who will be taking up these opportunities as vacancies increase. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. That was a whistle-stop tour of the research,
yes.
But just for everyone's information, that research is available on our website, and so you can read it in more detail if there are parts that you would like to delve into, or feel free to ask a question to us if you would like more detail on any of those points. I believe that the Minister for Employment, Mims Davies, is now with us. Oh, I feel like I'm on Stars in the Rise. Hi, Mims. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I was really hoping it's not Stars in their eyes, because my voice is terrible. So, really good. Well done, Fiona. That was a whistle stop and very, very interesting. So, yeah, very pleased to be with you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. So, Fiona's given that kind of overview, and I believe you've had a advanced sight of the research, so it would be great to get some of your reflections on that research, and I guess in the context of what the government are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of thoughts, and I've been scribbling bits down and adding to my remarks as I heard Fiona. And yeah, I have been here. Sorry, I was perhaps looking like I was hiding, but I've been here. And actually, good afternoon from Peterborough Job Centre. I've been having the pleasure of opening one of our new Plan for Jobs job centres this morning in Peterborough, and working with the local team. And I'll come on to some thoughts about management and taking that through later in my remarks. And it's a real pleasure to join you and share my thoughts and my department's thoughts on the Building Stronger Foundations report. Lucky to have early sight, which we're grateful for, and thank you very much. So it's a real pleasure to see so many people from across the industry and across all of people interested in how work goes. And it's been something of a big change around the pandemic. So we need to work out what's been good, bad and ugly about it, and how we can learn from that. So it's brilliant to be joining the CMI members at this virtual launch. We do really miss being back together, and hopefully next time we can do this face to face. We see the benefit of that in our job centres, and hopefully soon, when we're chatting together about these issues, it will be in the same room. So the research vitally highlights the collective responsibility every organisation has to help people just starting out into the world of work. I met some of those at B&M stores this morning, some of our Kickstarters, some of those who've been waiting, sitting in their bedrooms for the last year and a half, wondering what the next few years brings for them. And those people who have lower skills and really need to gain those extra skills, and importantly, be able to progress on from those entry-level jobs into higher skilled, better paid ones, so that they feel more valued and more developed. And I think one thing that we have seen in our JCPs is that people do want more resilience as a result of the pandemic. They aren't prepared to settle with where they are, and that gives us a great opportunity to help them progress. And we do have a in-work progression report, which was actually put out before this all happened, and we'll be hearing, I think, soon about. So it's something that our department is really keen to think about, pandemic or no pandemic. Now, managers are often the first and most important people in terms of helping to create that nurturing, inclusive environment where people can really thrive and get that key support they need. And that's certainly that we're seeing firsthand here at DWP, as we've got 2 job centres now in Peterborough, a changed workforce, new people coming in. You've got to bring everyone together and make it work. And, you know, management and actually the progression opportunities that's given in DWP because of the pandemic has been really interesting, and we're learning from that ourselves. Now, I do really think, and it's part of much of the offer that we have at DWP now, mentors play a huge and incredibly important and valuable role in developing people. I'm always mentoring people. I'm still doing it at the moment. I'm very conscious that I might not be the best, but I think it's very important to share what you know, you learn, and be willing to pass that on. And at any point in your work journey, you really could do with that person just to, you know, see the way forward and give you that extra help. So I do agree that organisations should be doing everything that they can to encourage and support mentoring at any point of that employment journey. Now, the coronavirus pandemic and its impact has had considerable impact on the UK labour market. And we know that it's our young people and people working in sectors requiring lower skills who've been especially affected. But also many of those people have been at the front line, continuing to work really hard and really stepping forward in this scenario. And I think we've really valued and appreciated some of those sectors. So thank you to those people who've stepped up. And the government's priority, of course, is rightly to deliver recovery from the impacts of COVID-19 that shows that the UK is more prosperous, healthier, stronger than before the pandemic, that we really want people to have that access to the same opportunities, regardless of their postcode and where they live, their background or their gender. And particularly a big priority for me is our young people. It was coming into this pandemic. We do not want a pandemic generation. We know the impact and potentially of scarring effect. So we're absolutely determined to make sure that we challenge all of the barriers that may be more exacerbated because of the pandemic. So I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight some of the government's great employment support and skills focused initiatives. And I know they're great because I've been working very hard on them and I'm very proud of them. And in fact, this afternoon, some of our work coaches have been sharing just how much that support, particularly for our young people and those lower skills, really matters in terms of progression, moving into work, helping also people to understand and value their transferable skills and really pivot into the new sectors that are out there. And we're rightly focused on that principle that nobody will be left behind because of the pandemic. And as the report says, we provided that unprecedented level of support. And I think unprecedented is a word that people kind of feel a bit sick of. But I think in terms of this, we're absolutely right, because it comes down to individuals, to businesses, to communities, and investing over £30 billion in these measures to create and support and protect jobs in terms of Plan for Jobs was absolutely the right thing to do. And we do have an important range of support in place for young people and low skilled workers. Our flagship job creation scheme is, of course, Kickstart, been living, eating and breathing it since last July. And that's about creating, even with the pandemic backdrop, 250,000 new 6 months quality work placements for our young people, most at risk of long-term unemployment. Now, each 6 months Kickstart placement is something that employers also are required to support the young person to be future more employable. And absolutely this includes things like career advice, goal setting, support with CVs, interview preparation, and developing and identifying transferable skills. And that's exactly what was happening with the young people that I was talking to with at B&M this morning. Don't want to mention a competitor, but I was in real at the range not that long ago. Yesterday, I was at Yorkshire Water, hearing from young people, and also speaking to one of our wonderful holiday parks in Aberconwy. You know, this has been incredible in terms of how employers have stepped forward and really given that first chance to our young people. They know that they've developed and had a great opportunity because someone gave them the hope, the start, the opportunity. They saw that potential in that young person. I think if we can all think back to the start of our work journey, whether it was someone at school or college, a teacher who inspired, was it, you know, somebody who took you on as your first role, or whether you spoke to someone with your CV in hand and someone gave you that chance because they saw that you were tenacious. And I think it's really incumbent on employers to think back to how green and naive we would have all been on our work journeys, and absolutely make sure that if we got that start without the pandemic backdrop, that we make sure that we give our young people that start. So those people who are thinking about getting involved in the scheme, please do. And the scheme has been amazing in the fact that we've got over 900 gateway organisations who created those 30 jobs to start with. People can now apply direct. But they're also, as I say, not only giving those first jobs, their employability support and that extra wraparound support there is instrumental. And this will be key in terms of staving off the impact of scarring, making sure that our young people have long-term work, boosting their skills and confidence. We've got over 219,000 approved jobs, over 900 gateways creating them, and over 30,000 job starts. And currently across the DWP network, 133,000 jobs available, and they are in places from Pinewood to Llama Farms to Seek Help to social media advisors, you name it. There is an opportunity for people. In some ways, because of Kickstart, there is the best first chance that our young people are going to have, and I'm delighted about that. So our UK employers rightly continue to value, alongside Kickstart, the value of apprentices and what they can bring to businesses. And of course, businesses can offer new apprenticeships. We've increased the incentive for payments to £3,000 for every apprentice which you hire as a new employee. And don't forget, you can be an apprentice at any age, and that's running through till September this year. Excuse me. The increased payment also, by the way, means it's a great time to take advantage of that flexibility. So please don't hang back. And as part of Plan for Jobs, we've significantly increased our sector-based work academy programmes. The real power of them, again, was shown to me today in Peterborough. They are swaps. It's the most popular form of support. We do them in areas such as haulage, such as logistics, rail, you name it, care. And these placements consist of pre-employment training, work experience placement, a guaranteed interview of that real job. And last July, the Chancellor announced an extra 32,000 swap placements through to the end of March this year, plus providing DfE an extra 17 million to make sure that associated vocational training placements were available for the programme. And since then, we at DWP and our Secretary of State is committed to delivering over 80,000 swap places through to 2022. And we've adapted the programme so that even with the restrictions through the pandemic, the training, work experience and interviews of real jobs has happened. I've dialed in to a one in Staffordshire, seeing and talking to the people on the swaps and just seeing just how amazing it is for those people to recognise a very good, well-paid job in demand is within reach because of our sector-based work academies. And we're supporting the largest ever expansion of traineeships to ensure that young people have the access to high quality training they need, with the Chancellor confirming an extra 126 million by 2022 at budget and a further 43,000 traineeship placements this academic year. So this is in addition to the 30,000 places previously, and we've also extended the £1,000 incentive for payments for work placements, and that runs through to July next year. So we're really working rightly with employers to develop traineeships which will offer that progression and route vitally like Kickstart into apprenticeships and other jobs in priority sectors. Some organisations are already doing really great route ways for young people to make sure that they're linking up all these government measures, whether it's apprenticeships, Kickstarts or sector-based work academies. And this is all about an outcome, and that is long-term job prospects. And as of May this year, we've started to deliver our first ever occupational traineeships developed alongside trade bodies and employers in areas such as rail. And that's again going to be expanded into further priority sectors this summer. And these measures will help more young people to be ready. And cross-government, we've got a really sector focused skills development, and we're really linking into international best practice, whether it's around hospitality or haulage. I was on with the haulage sector this morning. I was speaking to the hospitality sector on Friday. It's absolutely vital that we make sure that people understand that there's roles, opportunities and career paths, and they have the people just down the road waiting for these opportunities in those sectors, which tend to be Cinderella sectors as well. So we need to make sure that we've got people going into those sectors. And of course, with the roadmap and the ongoing cautious easing, we do need to make sure that we have work-ready employees, and that's what DWP are doing. That's why face-to-face is so important, so that we can really take advantage. And all this support can be accessed through DWP, through work coaches, through our new job help website. And we've also created a boosted DWP youth offer, which includes 3 elements. That's a 13-week youth employment programme focused on referring young people to the most appropriate work-related support, and the over 100 youth hubs, which we've developed since last September. Over 30 of them are now open face-to-face. They were virtually, and they have focused support from external partners and our youth employability work coaches, who are absolutely focused on those with the complex barriers and needs, absolutely linking into that. I'm conscious of time, but I do want to mention DWP Train and Progress. It's a new offer where people can stay on universal credit longer, making sure that they can take advantage of the new skills boot camps from DFE. So you can now take full-time training for up to 12 weeks where appropriate, and for those boot camps up to 16 weeks, and still be supported through universal credit, and that's part of the lifetime skills guarantee. So it means that no one can be stopped from progressing as a result. So as we move further into recovery, I think it's essential that we continue to support the growth sectors, as I've mentioned, that we work across government with DFE, that we work with our sectors such as care and construction, that we really make sure that we take advantage of the National Skills Fund, and that we're absolutely making sure that people understand the money going into skills boot camps. And we've talked about the role of managers, the raft of support that government's putting into place, but the third leg and the important tripod is, of course, working with employers. And of course, making sure that young and inexperienced people who really don't have the qualification beyond level 2, make sure that they get the most intensive and important support so that they can progress. And if I may, just before I close, and reflecting on the last year, there's some great stuff that we've done. We've busted through presenteeism in many sectors. There's a great opportunity to work flexibly and differently, be more inclusive, battle down the barriers, help people with caring responsibilities, disablement or health conditions. But I think we've got to be making sure that we don't have a middle class decision making in terms of management and support and progression, but because we don't see our teams and it is different, that people aren't left behind, and recognise not everybody can work at home and be flexible. So we have done all we can to support and protect jobs, and we will continue to do that. What we do need to do is make sure we give the confidence to our workforce so that they are high skilled, they're high productivity, they're a great UK workforce that have the skills fit for the future. And I think we're well on the way to doing that, despite the impact of the pandemic. Back to you, Daisy.
Thanks so much, Mims. I mean, so much stuff for reference there. I wonder whether we need to do a little follow-up to everybody listening to keep track of it all and let them know where they can access information about those different schemes. I mean, we definitely get the sense that things are a lot more joined up in terms of policy making across DWP, DFE, Treasury, etc. So that's really encouraging. just to come back to the research specifically, so Hayden is identified as a case study in the research report. So it would be great, Hayden, if you could just give us a sense of whether the research chimes with your experience of managing new low-skilled starters and young people during the pandemic, and how kind of prepared you felt to do that. And sorry, just before I carry on, I've been told to remind everybody to ask questions. You can type them in the box on the right. So Hayden, yeah, what was your experience like?
Well, given we couldn't actually send anyone off because we're classed as key workers working in the waste sector, but we had to obviously cover a lot of the guidelines and make sure that we complied with all the government advice out there. We did see a slowdown of new starters because we weren't able to get them inducted. But as soon as they were relaxed a little bit, we get them in. Obviously, minimal numbers at the moment, but as first point of contact, we obviously give them the knowledge and all the base skills they need to develop themselves within our current industry. So it's definitely been tricky, and it's definitely had its hurdles, but they've just been new challenges to overcome.
And you undertook a team leader apprenticeship. Do you feel like that helped you to develop the skills that you needed to support those people in work, or were there other things that happened within your employer that supported you to do that?
I think as part of my apprenticeship, it taught you how to deal with various different situations that may arise, be it with employees or any kind of other outside influence. But the beauty of the course is that those skills were easily transferable to other situations. So I did feel very well equipped to deal with any situation that may have arose and still arise to this point.
That's great to hear. So coming to you, Fiona, were there any findings from the research that surprised you?
Well, I think whenever you go into any piece of research, you always think, what am I going to find? And I think there were several things that I don't know about surprising, but had really stood out. So I guess the first thing is just how many people were still moving around the labour market. You know, that actually there were, although we'd seen quite a reduction in vacancies, there were quite a high number of people that were still changing jobs, moving employers. And so actually there were a lot of people that still needed support. I think it reinforced to me the critical role of managers. As Mim said, we all know that the person that manages you is so important in the success or otherwise of starting a new job, but continuing it as well. And that was really highlighted from those employee services. Managers, particularly those with direct experience, had just said how hard it had been to continue to support people, particularly given changing expectations, changing ways of working, remote working. And I was really impressed by how much effort people had put in. They went over and above. You know, you've got some of those case studies where managers have really put in those hours and that effort into engaging people. I think it did strike me, though, that quite a lot of that success was really down to individual effort, and that they'd often paid the price in terms of extra hours and kind of that the sort of juggling they'd done. And it did strike me that the more we can support managers to know effective ways of doing this and have whole organizational systems, you know, whether that's HR, whether that's wider support to help them do that, because it is such a critical role. I think just one last thing was that what we did find by asking very similar questions of managers and employees is that sometimes there was a real mismatch. So the things that employees said were really valuable to them perhaps had missed some of the managers, and the other way around. So managers said they spent a lot of time thinking about managing the health and well-being of their staff. And yet actually it was quite a low priority for those new starters. Only a small proportion mentioned it. Whereas actually new starters often said what they really valued was really honest and regular feedback. And I think that wasn't something that managers had prioritised in the same way. So lots there, but I think really reinforces that point that we are going to not make best use of some of our investment if we don't also make sure that we're really equipping managers to harness the skills and the energy and enthusiasm of people as they start new roles.
Yeah, and I guess some of the findings of this report echo research that we did last year called Management Transformed, which was looking at people's experience of working and managing through the pandemic, and particularly through that time when everything was very up in the air and there was a lot of uncertainty. And it came through really strongly that the kind of skills and behaviors that were most needed were communication. So two-way communication. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are Skyping your staff every single day or several times a day, but also checking with them about how often you should be communicating and what works for them. And so I think the point about it's still a little bit hit and miss, like it relies a lot on people, identifying or being particularly good at it or not, and where are the support mechanisms. And obviously as a chartered body, we provide a lot of support to that. One of the things we also asked for in the research, which is a kind of long running ask of CMI from government, is to consider management leadership skills as core skills, because often skills such as communication, problem solving, those are proxies for management skills in lots of cases. So I just wondered, Mims, I know that skills isn't officially your remit within DWP, but obviously there is quite a bit of overlap. With the skills bill going through right now, do you think there's an opportunity to kind of build in those sorts of more transferable skills at an earlier stage or throughout the life cycle, so that it's not just a bit over here and a bit over here, and it kind of, anyway, I'll let you answer.
Well, I think you're right, and that's why we've got the lifetime skills guarantee. And it's one thing actually I was talking to the young Kickstarters about today, and actually many of our particularly young people going into their career, I think a lot of people don't really recognise that you're going to be learning all the way through. That's really normal. It's really important. It will really help you to transfer, to thrive, to progress. And that it's almost like when we talk about learning and skills throughout our career, it's almost like we're sort of denigrating what we've already done rather than actually building on it. So I'm not a big fan of talking about upskilling, because I think you can be incredibly skilled, but actually you need to be able to work out how to transfer and build on them. And there kind of feels like a little bit like upskilling is, the last 20 years that you've done haven't been useful. Actually, that's complete rubbish. So I think there's an opportunity with the skills bill, whether it's around management or leadership or learning and progressing all the way through your life, to have that honest conversation, build on the lifetime skills guarantee. I hope people do feel, and Gillian and I, as skills minister, have lent in very hard together and across sectors and across bays to really work very strongly to make sure that there is a joined up approach for employers with government, that you are getting heard roundly, that you don't have to be knocking on every single department's door. It's really frustrating, and to really understand that alignment. So it's certainly something that me and my team will feed in. I think there's lots in there that we should be thinking about. But one thing I think we could all do as employers and as people who are looking at the employment space is to continue to have that honest, positive conversation about mentoring and learning and leading and sharing that experience. And so that people don't feel that when they have to do that, perhaps if they've been thrown into a change rather than it's been an active change, that it doesn't feel always such a negative. And I think if we can build that resilience and that leadership and that learning from the pandemic, then I think we've got a fantastic legacy amongst many good legacies from the pandemic. Lots of real big challenges and awful things we'd never want to go through again, but actually we can make some positive legacy there, particularly around cross-government.
Yeah, great. That's really good to hear. One of the other things that in this research covers a lot about the specifics that employees wanted to see from their manager and the specifics the managers were providing. And ultimately, all of that builds to create this supportive culture. So I just wondered if the panel had thoughts on what's the best way to build a positive company culture. Right now, it's particularly challenging, perhaps because still lots of people are working from home or working in slightly different ways. So Hayden, I don't know if you want to go first and talk about your experience at Veolia.
I think the best way to be able to install your own positive company culture is to be able to treat anyone just as a human being, be able to connect with someone on a personal level, and then if you have that initial connection, then you can easily share an end goal together, and people are a lot more happier in the workplace, and they're a lot more happier to gain a job, albeit, and we have various training courses that we actually provide to build on people's initial skill sets. So no matter if they come in with if they've changed jobs or if this is something completely new, we've got a dedicated team of trainers to actually build on people's experiences. And like I said, a lot of jobs, a lot of the skills are easily transferable.
Fiona, what about you from the research?
Well, I think from the research, I think we see a lot of people really building on kind of high trust relationships. And actually, you know, we're all people, and those are really critical, aren't they, to how you feel about your job, how much you put into it, whether you feel part of something. But it was building those high trust relationships was reflected both by managers and employees as much harder to do in a very different working environment. And so managers were saying in particular, connecting with colleagues, connecting with new staff, and then being able to sort of accurately assess performance and then help people improve it have been one of the real challenges. And if we think about kind of young people entering the labour market through Kickstart, or maybe just because, you know, that as they leave education, and we've had 2 cohorts do that during the pandemic, how we support young people and new entrants to kind of get that, to pick up that learning and development that you do just because you're sitting next to someone or you're part of a conversation. And for those of us who are working remotely, and I recognise that lots of the population aren't, it's easy to assume that because we are, everybody is, and they're not, thinking creatively about how we support people to do that is really important. As Mem says, you know, with lots of things thrown up in the air, there have been some things that we've not particularly liked that have been challenged. So thinking about, rather than just seeing when someone's in an office and counting hours, but thinking about kind of their outputs and their impact has been one of the things that we've had to think differently about. So I think re-establishing that relationship has been key. I think one of the pluses that came through the research as well was that managers have got a better sense of their workforce as being whole people that have had to juggle homeschooling and concerns about health and well-being and anxiety and all those sorts of things. And I think if we can get a good sense of people as whole, then I think we also can get the best out of them to think about how we manage, how we motivate, how we reward. So there's lots of opportunities to build on, but there's also some ongoing challenges. And I think we need to think about what we can do. Some of that might be about how we get really good training and development programs. Some of it, no doubt, will take money, but there's also some quite simple things we can do as well. So thinking about Kickstart MIMS, it's great to encourage lots of employees to engage in that, and it's a really, really positive measure. It'd be great to ask employers who are offering those placements what management support, what support will managers give those young people, and just even asking them to articulate that, I think could help them think a little bit more about the role of the manager and the support that those young people will get to kind of really kickstart their career, rather than just having a kind of a holding post for 6 months. I think there's some small tweaks we can make as well as bigger investments.
If I may, yes, Fiona. So when I was with Yorkshire Water yesterday, absolutely, that's what they're thinking about. They're also thinking about future-proofing their workforce. They're seeing an ageing workforce as well, and so they want to retain that knowledge and bring that through with their young people. So they're very much saying that. And as part of the application, Fiona, people have got to show this, that the additionality, what they're going to give in terms of wraparound, and how those young people are going to benefit on that. If I may, I'll quickly answer a couple of questions in the chat, Daisy, if that would be helpful. So in regard to Matthew's question on SMEs and supporting unskilled workers, particularly in the creative industries, we've got a great scheme called Skills to Screen, linked with a fantastic organisation who do that. And we've done that particularly in the Heathrow area related to the travel industry impact. And we're actually looking at broadening that out into other areas of the country. It's through our flexible support fund, and actually it's our creative industries are absolutely booming, which I'm sure Matthew's aware of. People massively want more content, and they want to make all of their content here because we've got an amazing skilled workforce, very agile, very brilliant workforce. But actually all of our sound stages and film stages are booked out, but we do have hubs in areas like Cardiff and Bristol and up in Scotland, other areas. So we want to bring that link potentially through to all of those other areas, and it helps diversify and really future-proof the workforce. Also explaining the breadth of opportunities there as well, and we're very much linking into SMEs that way. But Kickstart is a great way of bringing people into your business, and there'll be a local Kickstart link that you'll have at your local job centre. So if you get stuck, give us a shout, minister.employment@dwp.gov.uk. I'm sure CMI can pass along. So we're absolutely looking at all those sectors and areas. And also the creative industries isn't always just the sort of acting and glam bit. We need a massive amount of electricians and set directors, and their sound stage is being built at Pinewood. We've got Kickstarters there already. So, it's a really important sector for us. And Ian's asked a question in regards to the HGV drivers shortfall. Absolutely, that was the call that was on today. That is where we're doing our sector-based work academy work, so people get to be part of that. And in fact, B&M stores were talking to me this morning about going back to when they kind of had the driver's mate. So getting somebody to be in the cab, learn on the job with someone, and then go through the training to be a driver. So that's going on at the moment, and we're doing some really active work across government and with DfT to fix that. And there are things like changing the hours to be better to support people with caring responsibilities, or indeed having really more reasonable expectations on them as well. I know in the bus industry that actually doing split shifts, helping people that have got caring responsibilities and kids at school, and offering evening and weekend shifts has meant that actually more women have come into the workforce. It's led to happier passengers who've got great new bus drivers there and no shortfall. So sometimes it's about making sure that your recruitment processes and the way that you do things actually doesn't screen great new talent and people being able to progress out. And I think that's one thing, Daisy, that all employers can go back to. And also maybe look back at the people you've overlooked. Have you missed out some great talent? And, maybe go back and just say, are we screening people out by mistake? And that's certainly what Kickstart is doing. It is getting people who simply would nothing on their CV, so they would never have got through the door, but because of Kickstart they now can, whether it's in that sector or somewhere else, because they've got something to show that they can offer employers.
Yeah, I think we definitely agree about that point about flexibility and flexing the kind of entry requirements to make it more accessible. Brilliant, lots of stuff going on there. We're kind of nearly out of time, so I just wanted to ask the panel each in turn. I don't really mind who goes first, maybe I'll pick one of you. But we had some questions that were pre-submitted, and the ones that were coming up a few times were, what do we think is the main issue here, and what do we think might be the first port of call for a solution? So in your opinion, we've talked about a lot of different things. What's the kind of headline one for you, the one that you think is most important? Fiona, maybe I'll go to you first.
Thanks. I think for me, I'm going to have two, sorry. So I think in every policy where we are trying to support people to get back to work, we need to think about how we harness the power of managers to make that successful, so that people aren't rotating in and out of the labour market. I think that would be my policy one. I think my practice one is that through the research, there were lots of really well-intentioned, hard-working people who were just trying their best to think about what they could do. And I think making sure that where we have managers in our business, that they are trained and supported to do that well, because it's one of the hardest jobs in a business, but it is one of the most fruitful in terms of making people productive and supporting retention. And as a kind of non-CMI person, then I think that for me was really highlighted as being very, very powerful coming to this research afresh.
Thanks, Fiona. Hayden, do you want to go next?
I just think I'll continue to work closely with anyone that's got the drive and the willingness to learn. Basically, and the only issue we've ever found is actually getting people sort of through the door, being able to get them in. But yeah, I will continue to be their first point of contact, and remain as approachable as I can. And just, yeah, like I said, treat them as a human being. And like I said, if they've got the willingness and the drive to do this, which you find 99.9% of the time, anyone that comes here and wants a job, we'll give you a job, and we will improve your skill set and hopefully push you on to bigger and better things.
Thank you. And Mims, finally from you.
Yeah, 3 really quick points to create the progression. I think we need to encourage mentoring and learning at every stage, sharing that. I think we need to think about returners as well. There's a huge amount of people who could be returning, and that's where really good managing and support and mentoring can make a massive difference about future-proofing the workforce and letting people and allowing people to care and do everything they need to do. Flexibility might not work, but actually really thinking about returning is very, very important, and it's something that I'd like to get onto going forward. And finally, I think the biggest thing that comes up consistently at DWP and in my engagement with people is confidence. If you give them the confidence, that's what Hayden was saying, really. If you give people the confidence to both be a really good manager, to be really good supporter, to be able to think about the next step. And certainly the other bit at DWP I'd like to do is have people not always coming to us when they feel in peril or things are difficult, that actually it's when they want to progress and they're ready for the next stage. And if we can give them that confidence, that's really, really helpful. And then if you get that as a young person, that will take you all the way through your work journey.
That's a great note to end on, I think. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, to our panelists, Mims, Fiona and Hayden. If you are a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources to support you to be better managers. And if you're not yet a member, you can join our community via the link. That's also in the live chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. You can also sign up to our free CMI newsletter, which provides latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.